Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, everyone's had some lunch. Everyone's happy and full and ready for some excitement. Okay. So I was going to talk about Opt Store. Who am I? Tom Burek. I'm on the Nick steering committee. Been around here for quite a bit of time. Director of labs at Phlox. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the possibility of an alternative store prefix with Nix. We're going to do this now, and it's going to have some fun. Why? Because I've always wanted to play with it. I've always wanted to do a few things, and so that became the reason to do so. Okay. So what are we going to do? We're going to take a look at what is the store prefix, how it works, how this interacts with things. We're going to show you how to bootstrap a Nix system using a custom store prefix. And we're going to kind of figure out how this works. We're just going to play with this idea and then figure out whether or not, was this a good idea, was this a bad idea, and what we're going to do with it. If you have any questions, please interrupt me. Let me know if something is weird, something is out of order, or you just need something clarified and it's burning in your mind. Otherwise, you'll have to kind of kick me out of here. Okay, so let's start with what's a store? In the Nix world, right, the store is this kind of abstraction thing. It's where we put all our software, we put all our data, we put our compilers, we put everything in there, and that's kind of where it lives. And we have different kinds of stores available to you. Most likely the store that you're familiar with is going to be, well, the one that you have living on your local file system. This is called a local store. It usually lives at /nix/store. Other stores you're familiar with would be things like substitutors, like caches and substitutors that let you download from binaries from some other location. But basically, it's a place to put stuff. The store keeps track of references and makes sure everything is good to go, that you don't end up with something dangling, something doesn't end up broken. That's the concept of a store, and we have one that is the default, right? So you have this kind of really nice abstraction. When you want to copy things between different stores, right, it remembers references. You're not going to have something dangling. This kind of little bit like memory management being done for you. Some of these reference tracking is done for you. It's a little bit a simplified object model, right? There's less issues with permissions and timestamps and stuff in these stores because, well, we don't allow that to happen. And there's a whole bunch of implementations and protocols here for the transport side or what it looks like when it's on disk. You can go look through the manual for that. There's all sorts of ideas there. At Phlox, we have this concept of a catalog, which is kind of like an extension of the store concept, and it just tracks even more things than a normal store would track. Repola did a bunch of work with this local overlay store. How do I have two different kind of physical stores, but kind of present it logically as one to my software? Cachix is a service to be able to let you kind of have a store as a service, right? Caching as a service. Tvix has a project that kind of is able to try to do more deduping behind the scenes to save costs and things like that, but still expose it as this abstraction of the store. And there's more. There's projects, Harmonia, there's Trustix. These are all sorts of things to kind of play with this fundamental concept. And it's a powerful concept. We're actually trying to make this be exposed a little bit better. So there's a C API that should try to be, get more and more powerful so that you can kind of interact with it more programmatically. If you're interested in that sort of stuff, a good person to talk to is going to be John Erickson. He's over here somewhere, but you could talk to him. Okay, so what is this store prefix? Pretty much, we have this it's where software is going to live. It's what directory it lives in your file system. And well, why is changing it a big deal? Why can't I just put it somewhere else? Well, one of the reasons you can't put it somewhere else is because it matters to the hashes, the locations. So if you have some store path, here's an example one, and where did this hash come from? And it ends up becoming a hash of several other things, but one of the components of that is going to be which store you put something into. So if you put something into /nix/store, well, then you're going to end up with a different hash than if you put it somewhere else. So that's why this kind of might matter if we try to consider this as a thing. This could be a bad thing because now you have different hashes, but it could also be a good thing because, well, now we're tracking which store we're talking about for the software in question. So this is just kind of a bit to understand that. All right, so what's the problem? Normally we put stuff into /nix/store. Cool. But what if I don't have permissions to use that directory, right? What if I don't have access to this? What if I can't use namespaces, bind mounts? Then it becomes perhaps harder for me to use this. Examples of this where you run into it might be in AWS Lambda. You can't just start like messing with the root file system there because they don't expose that to you, right? If you're using like the native Lambda, not the container one. Sometimes some containers might not expose this to you or like let you do this. Let's say you're on like a Darwin machine and like they don't want you to be messing with the root system. What if you're on a university machine or a mainframe or in some large company where your sysadmin is like, no, you don't get to install stuff into root. Oh, and also like we're not going to let you bind mount stuff. Like now your options become a little bit more limited. Other thing you could say is, well, hey, because changing the prefix invalidates hashes, this is a kind of a benefit. You could say now you know that you have rebuilt everything, right? You didn't accidentally get something from some other cache, or you didn't get polluted from the foundation building it for you in our build farm. Let's say your company has a policy, everything must be rebuilt locally. This is a way to kind of get a little more guarantee that that thing has actually done the right stuff. Another thing to look at is, hey, let's say you're using /nix for something else. Maybe it's because you're trying to test Nix itself. You're trying to test the ability of Nix to manage multiple stores. Well, if you're trying to do some testing with Nix stores, with multiple Nix stores, inside of a Nix build, like all of a sudden it becomes too meta-circular and you kind of lose track of where you are. Having some other prefix actually helps you kind of separate concerns. So that's another possibility. Okay, let's give this a shot. We could use a bunch of Meson options. We can like patch out like from the binary in terms of like how it's built, and we can Nix build a thing against a different prefix. Cool. That's kind of like bootstrapping a compiler. We now could get to rebuild it one more time, but we can rebuild it in that new store to get a native Nix for that new store. That kind of works, but it gets annoying. And it's also easy to lose track of what you're doing. So instead, there's a simple approach. You could just kind of set an environment variable. You just set, hey, your Nix store variable to ops store, and you can now Nix build something, and you can kind of say, hey, I want to put all the results into some other location. And that kind of works pretty nice. It's not perfect. It has some issues, but it kind of gets you started and can like showcase like what is actually happening. If you try to build something like Nix packages hello, get ready, it's going to want to rebuild the world, right? And that's essentially what we wanted. Okay, so here's some challenges. Which store are we in? Now, because there's multiple stores, there's multiple prefixes, you have to kind of keep track of that in your tooling. There's an issue with, there is reuse of the same like home directory caches, eval caches, fetcher caches and stuff. They don't keep track of the fact that you might be using a different one. So just be aware of that's kind of something to do, or something to fix. Collecting garbage in these might be kind of a little bit weird because some of the tooling might not expect it. I was using Nix version 2.25.3, but there's going to be some differences depending on what version you are. And this stuff needs to be kind of exercised a bit more. So let's say you have to rebuild everything. You also now, like, can your Hydra understand this, like, alternative prefix, right? This is another consideration if you want to, like, rebuild the world or even if you want to use Hydra or not. Okay, so what's next? Let's see here. We did that. Okay, so now let's look at some more things we could do. Some of those problems, like for example, the caching. We could kind of fix that by saying, hey, we don't want to kind of put everything in the same place. We could kind of use the more detailed options available for stores. You can see here I've kind of broken them out into their things. This is not obviously syntactically correct, but I just kind of broke them out so you can see what options are available for like where you want to put your like var Nix, or where you want to put your logs, where is it going to live physically, where is it going to live like logically. These are all kind of independently controllable in the settings. And so that's one way also to kind of just set them and like make sure that they are what you want them to be. But there's some power there, so explore those options. All right, then let's get started. So I was like, hey, let's actually build this stuff. And to rebuild everything from like bootstrap all the way down to go build enough of a standard env to build hello, it took an hour and a half. thank you, Oxide, for kind of letting me just use a computer for a while and just like burn through it. So that's awesome. But it wasn't that bad. Basically, yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but eventually it completes. Another 2 hours for things like systemd. If you want to build like a whole Nix OS system, right, it's going to take a lot more time. Once you start trying to build things like, I don't know, TensorFlow or browsers, right, add many more hours to this thing. But you can build up something that's good enough to deploy, some piece of software, and it's not too bad. It's within the realm of possible, is kind of the point here. One use case that I've wanted to use is to deploy something to ABS Lambda. Again, they don't expose the root file system to you, so like, what do? Well, what you can do is just say, hey, I want to build something against /opt or /var task, which is where they kind of put all the software you put in the little zip files, and you could just copy it into place, and it all just kind of works. So that's kind of cool. Not the most important thing in the world, because there's plenty of alternatives and other ways to solve the problem, but it was something I wanted to play with and try. So that kind of works. Let's see, what else can we do? You could do this in containers. Again, usually you do have access to the root in a container, but maybe you don't for some reason. Or maybe you want to kind of you want to expose like Nix building inside of a container to people, but have your software kind of live somewhere else independently at a different prefix, right? So to have some independence between the two stores. You could do that too. So this is an example of how to do that, right? You just set your store, you set your config the way I showed you beforehand, and you can just copy into some like root directory the software that you're looking for. I'll make some symlinks here just so that like it's easier to kind of get to them once you're inside the container, and then your Docker file is just copy things in. Pretty simple. And whether that helps anyone, again, I don't really know, but it's viable, it's doable. This is the cache Nix pollution I talked about. So like your eval cache, fetcher cache, binary caches don't quite track which store you're talking about very well, or they don't get invalidated. So you can fix that by just like setting a few variables to say, hey, use this other cache, use these other config files, use these other like config directories, and then that way you get that independence. Oh, I got a question from Fareed. Yeah, so these things go into your home / like tilde home dot cache, and that gets reused even with that bind mount option. Yeah. So the question was, is this still a problem when you have like bind mounting, like if you're on a Linux machine where you have access for that? If you use some other store, Nix will bind mount that to the kind of over your /Nix usually, and then kind of expose that store for you. The home, like the .cache Nix pollution still happens because that happens in your home directory. So one question is like, should we fix this so that, even if you don't remember to set this sort of thing, that like caches will go somewhere else that is cache dependent. So fixing that might be a viable thing for us to do. All right, so what does this look like when you put it all together? Again, it's like setting a few variables to say, hey, use this other like root for my store. It sets a few configuration options, kind of be a little bit pedantic about like where to put everything. One thing I ran into was I have a bunch of other builders defined for distributed building. Well, you kind of want to turn those off because those builders probably don't know how to build against this store prefix, issues like that. There probably aren't any substitutors out there for the prefix that you picked. So I turned those off. But this kind of works roughly as is once you fix the white space issues. All right, what else can we do? So these are ideas. Some of these might be really bad ideas, so bear that in mind. What if you have two different stores and you actually have them interact, right? So you could be running software from one store that's going to use software that's delivered by another one. So there's almost like a firewall between them. Yeah, you're sacrificing a little bit of like single view of reproducibility, but maybe that's exactly what you want. Maybe you want one of the stores to be provided by one organization or entity, and it just kind of publishes stuff to a known location, and another store is going to start using it. I don't know, that might be useful. One use case would be to like deliver software and then do like data processing this way, right? So your other store, your new one, is purely for like data transformations, like not even about software. Possible. What else can we try to play with? Um, should someone, oh, question from Fareed. Yeah, okay, so the question was, like, what do I mean by multiple stores? And I apologize, I should have explained this a little bit more. What I mean here is, if you look at the kind of the code here about, how to invoke this, I have an option here that says extra sandbox paths. So that would mean, hey, go bind mount this like /nix store and make it available while you're doing builds for your /opt store. So it's kind of like bringing in or exposing different stores to each other. The thing that you had mentioned was, what if you had multiple -- stores that can like talk to each other? I think that's a bit more complex, but I mean, I don't know of a use case off the top of my head, but it could be useful for someone, I guess. So anyway, a lot of part of what I'm trying to do here is not really say, again, this is a good idea or you should do this, but I'm just trying to say, hey, this is possible. And maybe this does become a use case for someone, and then maybe we make the support for it nicer and better and kind of do various things, but it's viable. A question is, would it be helpful for us to actually have someone go and do regular builds of a different prefix? This helps make sure that, hey, Nix packages doesn't have like some weird dependency on it has to be /Nix. It prevents hard coding. It's an alternative, right? It's some other alternative that's available. We don't want to do too much duplication because, we don't want duplication, but is it worth doing? I don't know, right? If there's a demand for it, then like, okay, cool, like we can do something like this, get a few people together, and we like fund it and build it and, run it. Does this require changes to Hydra? Another question. But it's an idea. Again, if this is of interest, please let me know. Another like store type of a thing is, so like, how does Conda work? One of the things that Conda does is it uses a very specific prefix to say, hey, we're gonna build against this really long prefix, home, Anaconda 1, 2, 3, and then like, it just builds everything with that. And then when it delivers software to like the client, to the user, it then just does hash rewriting locally. It just goes, finds all the instances of like that prefix and just fixes them to be like home and then whatever your username is. That's why they used such a long username there. And that's just kind of how it works. That's pretty nice because you don't need root permissions, you don't need access to some sort of like, your root file system. Should we do something along those lines? Again, I don't really know. I'm looking for ideas and opinions. Okay, so we could do, oh, we got a question. Yeah, so the question is, what about origin? So what is being talked about here is when you're doing dynamic linking, when you got like elves and headers, you could say, rather than giving me a library based on an absolute path to something, you could say, I want it relative to some origin. And there have been some people who looked at this. I think there's some discussion in Nix packages. There's some issues for that. I think that's worth looking into. I don't know the current state of it. I know that it's possible. I do also know that we did run into some problems because there are sometimes we relocate stuff, not just like in terms of what directory they're in, but we kind of start sometimes nesting them deeper into places, and that breaks the origin trick. Maybe if we go through Nix packages and make it a policy that like, if something is going to be in /lib, it's always going to be in /lib. It's not going to be in /lib/something else, right? Breaking the origin like trick. So that could be something that we do. That's a possibility. I would be in favor of something like that because it makes now the whole store easily relocatable, but that requires some attention and some work. More ideas. I love it. I love more ideas. How are we on time? 5 minutes. Okay. We can play with some things here. So one thing we could do is, yeah, we could zoom in maybe. Oh my God. So this is kind of like the quick, easy way of doing it just for demonstration purposes, but it's actually not that bad. You just say, hey, I want a Nix store of opt store give me a shell with hello in it, and use this like other opt root. This is going to use that trick that Nix has on Linux machines where it will bind mount this opt root into /opt for me. So it's going to go ahead and go do that. Hopefully everything works correctly, and the demo gods like me. Great. So now I've got a bunch of stuff in opt. Yay. And this is just like a rebuild of a bunch of things. Let's see here. Where is everything? Great. I got a bunch of like hellos. Great. Great. I have a hello that lives there, and I can run it. Yay. Did that work? I actually can't see from my side. Great. That worked. Oh, yep. Question? I will absolutely do LDD on this. Oh no, what just happened? Did something from /nix leak into my, my build? What happened? Why does LDD tell me that the dynamic linker is /nix? There's a reason for that. It's because LDD doesn't just sit there and read your binary. It actually kind of starts to run it. And, well, the LDD that you run actually impacts the outcome that you get. So the LDD that I ran here is like my normal one that's Nix provided. And so it kind of was like, well, I already have a interpreter. And then it kind of gave it to me. So if you run, let's go find a, if I run the LDD that's provided by the opt build in the opt store, then it actually reports the correct thing. There you go. So, hooray, success. All right. So that's kind of a thing. I started this and something completely broke, and I'm like, I have hash mismatches. I saw this error and I was like, oh no, there's somewhere in Nix packages. I'm gonna have to go patch it and go fix this and go fix that. And like, it's hard coded somewhere. And I was kind of really, I actually thought that's gonna be the bulk of my talk was like how I got it to work. And then it turned out this was just some random like Nix packages bug that was fixed in a future PR. And it just was it was just an upstream bug. Thank you, Tristan, for helping me notice that. And yeah, so actually, Nix packages is already compatible with alternative prefixes, like as far as I can tell. I mean, I'm sure somewhere there might be issues, but yeah. Oh, Graham?
Sort of in comic, the use case that I think probably fits a lot of people is that there's Nix packages up on the internet, posted like faster, and then there's our private code that's enterprise specific, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like, and sort of, I guess Golang does this too, right? You can have a Go private, which you can have your private Go code, which is different than all the rest of the Go code, right? I wonder if that's sort of a use case. And imagining the Anthropic example before, they've got a whole lot of code they're building, and all these containers that could live in one store, and everything else could live in the other store, right?
Yes, so the comment was, if I can recall it correctly, was it was a use case here is to have a store that where like your private software can go, and then you have another store where all your publicly available like Nix packages type of software can go, and it gives you some isolation between them rather than kind of mixing it all into one. Absolutely, yeah. I could imagine some like you work for a company and you would have a /acme/store, and then great, like all of your like company software goes there. Then you work for another place, and then their stuff will go somewhere else. Thank you for asking the question about the LDD, because that was exactly something I wanted to showcase, that there's a problem with just using LDD directly. Be careful running LDD on untrusted binaries. Don't do it. There's a CVE about it. There's all sorts of issues. But if you just do readelf or patchelf or something, or do object dump, you'll see it is actually correct. So I could do the Lambda. I don't think I'm doing the Lambda demo, but basically it's that example I kind of showed earlier, which is roughly this. Basically, you just copy the thing into like its own like root, and then you just zip that up and send that to AWS Lambda, and AWS Lambda takes care of it. So that's, I could kind of show you a make file that does that, but I don't know how helpful that would be for anything else. And that's actually about it. So I'm about done. Any questions? The point of this was really not to say that this is good, not to say that it was bad, just to say that it was possible, and to kind of spur some thought that maybe there are some use cases out there, and to just expand the brains a little bit. Question in the back? Sorry, say that again? For example, the eval cache. Oh, so the question is like, what is the problem of the thing that goes into the user's cache directory that causes problems? And I don't know if I mentioned it. Yeah, so some of those things are going to be the fetcher cache. So the hashes that go into the fetcher cache, or like what the store paths are, your Nix caches they're not isolated from, they don't know what prefixes they've been applied to. So if you end up reusing your XDG or home directory caches, you'll get like weird answers once you like run some operations after the fact. So if you like do this and accidentally pollute it and you end up with like weird results, just delete that cache or do the trick where you point it to some other location. There's a little bit of crosstalk there, but maybe we should kind of do that a little bit better. But at the moment, it's still basically a bug or an annoyance. One more. I know there are some places where like the Nix store prefix is hard-coded, but in the things that I did, I basically just did some like standard end, I built some compilers, I built some stuff with Rust. I didn't go rebuild the entire world because that would take a long time, and I just didn't do that. But I know there are some places, maybe in some patches somewhere, and there's some like library code that has it hard-coded. But surprisingly, I didn't run into a problem. Actually, going into this, I expected to run into problems and like have to talk about each one of them and go fix them and PR them, but luckily I didn't. So that's actually a good sign. And I think that's about it. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful